Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us today to discuss how food and bev brands should be evolving and adapting in light of the new HFSS regulations and, more broadly, a healthier eating agenda. My name is Sarah Hollinshead, and I'll be guiding you through today's discussion, asking key questions, and I'll also be sharing some insights and data points from consumers themselves around this regulations. And these have all been gained via the Attest platform. So I am head of Attest. No, that's not who I am. Not running the company. I am head of content at Attest. For those who may not know us, we exist to make uncovering insights with consumer data ridiculously easy, fast, accessible, reliable, so that businesses can be making the right decisions and be making more genuinely customer-centric decisions and be doing that on a continuous basis. So we know from supporting many brands within the food and bev space that healthy eating it's just never been as such a big focus as it is today. We have Henry Dimbleby calling for new taxes on sugary and salty foods in his national food strategy. We've got brands reformulating to improve their health credentials. And of course, the government looking to crack down on in-store promotions. So although we've got a slight delay of 6 months, giving us a little bit more breathing room. I think for food and bev brand leaders, the pressure is really on to enable consumers to be able to be making healthier choices. So although we're still early days for us as the industry, we wanted to dig into this a little bit more and be able to answer some key questions for you. So what is the role of brands and retailers in creating a healthier food environment? What approaches and strategies are going to be the most effective for engaging consumers on how to be eating healthier, and how can we as an industry ultimately be making healthy food more affordable, more desirable, and more profitable for us, for businesses as well. So to explore this extremely important topic, I'm really pleased to be joined by the fantastic Becky Home, National Account Manager at Mallow Marsh. So Mallow Marsh, a beloved client of ours, have had an incredible growth story from Dragon's Den to a multi-million company, and really have a fantastically premium snack that tastes great, that's putting marshmallow on the map. And Becky herself has joined the company at the end of 2019 from M&S, so brings awesome insight from a grocery and from an in-store perspective. So I'm so excited to have you join me today. Thanks, Becky.
Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. One note for our lovely audience before we dig in, no pun intended, we will be taking questions. So I encourage you to ask away. However, to save on time within the session, we're going to be responding in a written format as opposed to discussing live. That means we're able to answer all of your questions regardless of the time that we've got. So some of your answers may come up after the session, but we will try and come back to all of you. So please do get those questions in, and we're more than happy to come back. So on to our sort of first topic for today: how important is healthy eating to consumers? And as well as supporting our partner brands with customer insights around this that they are doing on a custom basis, we've actually launched our own public report into this because we think it's so important. So we've been looking at healthier eating as part of our regular Food and Bev Digest, which is like a free to subscribe publication that comes out quarterly. And so one area that we've seen in the data and a huge shift in is how thoughtful consumers are around their health, especially, as you can imagine, with the global pandemic. So we ran some research at the start of the year, and we found that the top intention for shoppers in 2021 was to eat more healthily. 55% of people said this was a goal for them, and 23% are saying they're actively trying to lose weight by going on a diet. And if you contextualize this in their product choice as well, when choosing a product, price and taste coming up 1 and 2, as we would expect, but health is really coming in there as a factor, and that's beating convenience, that's beating ethics, that's beating packaging. So health is really important. But despite this, we're seeing just over half of the population saying that they frequently eat unhealthy. So 69% eating unhealthy snacks. And the biggest snackers are Gen Z. 58% of them are treating themselves almost daily or most days. So what we're seeing really is people's intentions are not quite translating into action yet. So Becky, how have you seen consumer attitudes on health change recently, considering those statistics I've just said, and especially since the pandemic?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because I think although many have tried to eat healthier because of COVID-19, and I think definitely there's been a shift into, what we're putting into our bodies. Is there anything artificial? Where's it been made? Is the packaging recyclable? I think when people are stressed and times are uncertain, they're tending to snack more. And I think a really kind of like a truth in the matter is actually Gen Z, times are very uncertain for us and kind of a lot of people. I think what they're saying is they're planning to eat healthier, but actually the reality is they're snacking now more than ever. So I think for me, it'll be really interesting moving into 2022, seeing whether people actually plan to do what they say. So if you take a look at the products that have launched this year, it's a lot around the calorie message. For example, Mars under 100 calories. I think calorie and portion control is here to stay, but I think the reality is in uncertain times, people are saying it, but actually they're going down the confec aisle, they're having biscuits, they're treating themselves to crisps because they're a bit stressed and anxious. So I think for me, it'll be really important to see in the kind of Attest surveys and as time goes on, actually what happens moving forwards, because I think in reality, they're saying they want to, but they're not actually doing what they say.
And how much does that influence what you're doing as a strategy at Mallow Marsh? Like snacking must be so integral to your, the amount of products you're selling, to your bottom line, really. So how much of an impact does that have, and how much of an eye do you keep on this?
I think for us, snacking is really important, but it's also really important about being transparent. Consumers in COVID, there's so many different stats being thrown at us. And I think in uncertain times, people want to know what they're putting into their bodies. So yes, we have calories front of pack, but actually our first and foremost mission is we're premium confectionery. You eat Mallow Marsh to have a tasty and indulgent treat. And actually, do you know what? The fact that we're better for you than maybe a Mars bar is fantastic. That's the added benefit. But I think for us moving forward, it's all about transparency, portion controlled, and allowing people to make smart decisions about what they're snacking on.
Yeah, we don't want to be demonizing people for having a treat. It's just allowing them to feel like they're making an informed decision about it. And then, as you say, it's better for you than the kind of traditional confectionery like a Mars bar. And it's just being able to impart that knowledge onto the consumer, right?
Absolutely. I think, we all know that actually if we want to eat a Mars bar, we know what we're eating. It's a traditional confec and it's also more affordable. And I think we need to come back to what the Attest surveys have told us. People are motivated by price first and foremost, and we can't forget that. Premium confec is a luxury. And I think we just need to balance, actually, we need to tackle obesity, absolutely. But also people, in COVID maybe have less money than they had before. So it's all about taking kind of things, it can't just be about just healthy eating, it's about the affordability. And I know we'll come on to that in a minute.
Yeah, let's go there now. I completely agree. We're thinking about barriers for healthy eating, and that's something that we looked into. So the intention's there, but then consumers at large aren't doing as well as they want to be. So what's blocking them? And we actually did some research in 2019 where we found that the biggest challenge faced by UK consumers when it came to their diets is the cost of food. So half of Brits are saying that they're struggling with the cost of healthy food, particularly. And this has just been compounded by the pandemic. So more than a third of people saw their grocery budget go up, and beyond cleaning products, which obviously went up, we were spritzing everything. Fruit and veg was the category that they were spending the most on. So how do we drive that change? Well, in our recent report, we found that 76%, so over 3/4 of people said that healthy foods becoming more affordable was likely to change their purchasing behavior. And 84% of respondents have agreed that offers and promotions would encourage them to buy healthier food. And this is particularly important for Gen Z and millennials as well. So cost, be interesting to hear a little bit more about your thoughts, Becky, around pricing as a premium offer. How do you sort of position yourself there? But then are there any other barriers that you're seeing to healthy eating?
Yeah, I think promotions are a great example, because if we look at HFSS categories, for example, we see very deep deals, half price, sometimes better than half price. If we take sugar confectionery, it's buy 5 for £1. So really and truly, we're encouraging consumers to buy more than they actually need to. Whereas if we look at the healthier food categories, we see very, very shallow deals that aren't always front of store. They're not always on gondola ends. So for me, I think there's an education piece as to how we can eat healthily on a budget. So actually, were people buying carrots rather than carrot sticks, for example? And I know that with Attest, we had a really interesting conversation a couple of weeks ago where actually there are people in very deprived areas that only have microwaves to cook with, for example. How are we supporting them to eat healthier? So for me, there's kind of a couple of things that we need to talk about. It's actually balancing promotions within HFSS categories, which I know the legislation is looking at, to say, if we're asking people to switch out of buying, Cadbury's buttons every day and into buying maybe something a bit healthier, or really reviewing how often they eat it, I think we need to maybe look at how often we promote it and then enable them to kind of, buy something that's slightly healthier. Because to your point, even if they're spending less money on confectionery, they want to reduce their basket spend overall. And I think within that, where's our positioning? Well, at Mallow Marsh, we are premium. And like I said, we don't expect to sell kind of the volume of a Cadbury or a Galaxy. What we say is actually we'd rather people ate Mallow Marsh 3-4 times a week, really enjoyed it, really indulged, but actually they've eaten us as a portion control, maybe after lunch with their cup of coffee. We're not expecting them to eat us every single day. So I think for us, it's actually how can we work with people to maybe change the mindsets? But I think it is a difficult one, because we know that obviously HFSS categories drive volume. We know that 5 for £1 is what kind of, hits the buyer's bottom line. So I think it's not an easy one, but for me, it's not just about making healthy foods more affordable. It's about reviewing HFSS categories at the same time.
It's interesting. We're putting a lot of onus on the consumer to be making more conscious decisions, right, at basket or in store. And do we feel like we're coming to the end of like impulse buying? Because you can imagine these people just have, they're like, oh, well, I bought my Cadbury's buttons and that's my go-to snack, and I'll pick that up and put that in the basket. Do we think we'll really see like a move away from that impulse buying to something that's a little bit more considered?
Well, I think if we take some queuing systems at the moment, protein has kind of been the word of the moment, the trend of the moment. And I think a lot of kind of what's in the queuing systems now in the supermarkets is very different from what it was a few years ago. Yes, you still got your traditional confit, your traditional crisps, but there are a lot of people with calories front of pack, low fat, low sugar, low salt. And actually you see people, if you kind of stand and you're in the queuing system, people are looking back of pack, front of pack. And I think people, I wouldn't say they're necessarily all the way there. And I think if you are on a budget, sadly, you don't have the luxury to be able to afford maybe the slightly more expensive, healthier version. And I think that's something that we will all want to tackle. So I think we're going in the right direction. But to your point earlier, I think people say a lot of things, but the reality is they still go down the confect aisle and they want their traditional, whether it's digestives or buttons or whatever it may be.
Yeah, it's interesting. Maybe we need to dig into a little bit further as to actual behaviors when they're selecting each product, like how much time is taken to consider, track that over time and see if we see a shift there. That would be really interesting. I want to pivot a little bit more to focus just on the HFSS proposals, specifically what's included in there, consumer responses to that, and what you're up to around those elements, Becky. If we look at the proposals outlined by the OHP, we found that the making the healthy food more affordable option had the most support, which we've touched upon before. This sort of positive incentive is what customers are really hoping for here. Most popular after that, we see that the forcing of manufacturers to reduce salt and sugar content in their products, that's supported by 40% of people. And then actually taxing unhealthy foods to make them more expensive is the least popular of the 8 proposals that we put in front of the consumers. That's only supported by 26% of people in the UK. So in general, there's this low support for the more draconian legislation. And this is matched again. So the banning of sale of energy drinks, supported by only 27%, banning of ads of unhealthy food between 6 and 9 by less than a third, 30.5. And the younger people as well, in particular, are most opposed to this sort of prohibition style measures. Boomers are slightly more in favor of it, but we're generally seeing a leaning towards more positive affirmation, making healthy food more accessible rather than trying to control and block the unhealthy food, which again for you is a sort of sweet treats brands, Becky. I'm super interested in your take on these stats and more broadly how you've approached the whole HFSS regulations at Mallow Marsh.
Yeah, I think they are really, it's kind of so interesting. And I think when we take actually, 26% of people don't want kind of things taxed, I think that's just a great example of actually the sugar drinks tax maybe hasn't worked as well as we would have liked, because I don't think people have noticed that Coke is a couple of pence more expensive than maybe Diet Coke, for example. Yeah. But I think for us, actually, funnily enough, HFSS it's not easy and it's very difficult, but because we are a premium product, we're open and honest about who we are. Actually, reformulation isn't within our plan. We want, like I said, when people go down the confectionery aisle, they want to indulge, they want to eat something that tastes great. And actually, coming back to kind of what we were talking about originally, price, then taste, then health are most important. And actually, we are the price we are because, we're handmade in the UK using proper Belgian chocolate, all the ingredients are properly sourced. There's nothing artificial. So actually, we are the price we are for a reason. But then I think beyond that, people tell us that we taste great. So we wouldn't want to reformulate because we don't want to compromise on that taste. What we're saying is actually, let's take our consumers on a journey. And by putting calories front of pack, we're probably one of the only confect brands within the pouch area that's got calories front of pack. What we're saying is actually we're allowing you to make an informed decision that actually when you eat a kind of, for example, a salted caramel bar, or you have a serving of our salted caramel pouch, it's only 79 calories. We know marshmallow is made with sugar. Everyone does. We're not lying to you about that. But what we're saying is actually, are people being truthful about what's in their products? So for us, we've always been proud of who we are, where we're made and where we come from. But, I think it's actually harder for the brands that are maybe on the blurred line of kind of healthy, kind of not healthy. Do they reformulate? Do they not reformulate? Are people willing to accept kind of change in taste and things like that? So in terms of Mallow Marsh actually being a confect brand, I almost would say, although our life isn't easy because everyone wants gondola and one space, and of course we do, it is slightly easier being within a category that everyone expects to be unhealthy. So I think they almost go to our fixture when they see that we're slightly lower calorie, slightly low fat, maybe less sins. They're like, oh my God, my day has been made. I can eat a whole bag of Mallow Marsh and I don't feel as guilty. Because I think one of the things that's come out of our Attest surveys really interestingly is people feel very guilty when they eat chocolate, when they eat crisps. So we're saying, how can we make you feel less guilty, but still indulge in a tasty treat?
Yeah. And I think, as we said before, this isn't about banning all tasty treats. This is about people knowing what they're putting into their bodies. And I think it's really interesting what you're saying about kind of transparency, education versus reformulation. And I think we'll definitely come on to reformulation, because I imagine a lot of the listeners are tossing up with this debate now, right? It's a big decision that they're having to make in terms of what moves and strides they make here. But I think back to what you're saying about packaging, this was actually a really interesting insight that we found in our study, which was actually 39% of people believe they're able to make informed decisions right now from current front of pack labeling. So that means 61% don't feel like they can. I just think that's huge. Like, the way that you're explaining it is so simple, but we've all been there when it's like, this is the content per 100 grams. What is a portion? This sort of confusion about the way that it's presented. It feels sort of sneaky and it's really hard to actually attain the information that you want. Actually, 44% of people claim that they find the labels confusing, and to the point where 14% just don't even bother looking anymore. So this is where we're at. This is a huge space for the industry to go to, right? This is a huge opportunity, and it's all massively linked into what we're talking about, which is just making the sort of sugar and salt content just more transparent so that we can trust consumers to make more educated choices.
And I think, when we talk about kind of who's responsible for change, and I know that's kind of within our next set of slides, I think it is just really important to actually say we're not just saying to people, you cannot ever eat chocolate crisps or HFSS products ever again. But what we need to tell them is actually, there might be an alternative that has 50% less sugar. Why don't you try that one? Or actually, if you want to eat the one that has the 50% extra sugar, that's fine, but they're informed. And so I think that's a really interesting topic as well around, labelling. Actually, is there more that we can do at shelf, which I know we'll come on to in a minute. But I think to your point, it's not just about the draconian measures of saying no at 6 to 9 p.m. It's the kind of wider education piece that I think we're all really on board with.
Yeah. And it's like marketers, we have to make this fun, right? We can't just make this like, no, because that's not going to be, that's not going to be the effective way. And that's also going to be no fun for, us in these roles either. So, I think really nice linkage into who is responsible for this change, as you've said, because education, I think, is clearly appearing as a theme here that is an important element for brands right now. And we put this to consumers. So we asked them, who do you think is responsible for making these changes? And actually, it was 76% of people believed that supermarkets need to act. And that's versus 67% of who say the same about manufacturers. So there's this leaning towards supermarkets. And what's really interesting is we actually polled people about this in 2020, and there was far less of a distinction. So actually about 90% of people just thought they were both equally responsible to act upon this. So it's super clear that both parties need to be working together to tackle big issues like this. Consumers are looking more towards the supermarkets. Is it because they're maybe more trusted brands, or they're the kind of figureheads of their shop? But yeah, it'd be interesting to hear your view, Becky, on just what is good collaboration here between retailers and between brands and other organizations.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting when we talk about trust within the pandemic specifically. I do think people, when everything was shut, where was open? The supermarkets. You knew that they were doing everything they could to protect us in the pandemic and make sure that we had great availability. So I think actually for us, being a smaller brand, we absolutely have a role to play in HFSS and ensure we're transparent, we're honest, and we help educate the customer. But the supermarkets have a much larger share of voice. So for me, it's actually about helping to the consumers to understand where are the hidden sugars, salts, fats. So kind of one of the things that, when discussing with supermarkets, we're thinking about is it altering the traffic light system? Is it having barcodes on shelf to call out products that aren't HFSS? Or like I just said, to call out the alternatives that maybe are better for you? Is there a kind of, within the HFSS products, is there a kind of better for you section within Confect, for example, that pulls those products together? So I think for me, it's all about how can we give consumers as much knowledge and info as possible to make educated and informed decisions. And I know one of the discussions we were having yesterday that was really interesting was about the role of in-store versus e-commerce. And actually, a lot of people in e-commerce, especially when they're grocery shopping, they're busy, they're short of time, they've got things in their favorites. So how can we make it so that they know that things in the favorites, is it, something pops up and says, this is the healthier version. So they know that they do have an option and actually what they're eating. So I think there's loads of ways to go, but I almost think there's so much that can be done. It's knowing what's best to be done and almost which way do you go first? Do you go kind of front of pack? Do you go at the shelf? Do you go as you enter? Like, what can we all do? It's really difficult, but I think it's just, even as a small brand, it's just having those open conversations with our retailers to say, actually, we're really proud that we are a slightly better for you Confect product. Can we be celebrated a bit more within our retailers, for example?
Yeah. And I think it's such an interesting point you raise around online versus in-store, because in-store, there's so much like fighting for space, right? And online feels almost like there's just more share of kind of space for consumption there. And does that become more of an important educational tool, as you said, like having, here's a healthier option being prompted, or just having the ability to have that information in terms of what goes into it, what that portion control is, just more clearly, comparatively, like side by side. I think massive opportunity appears to be online here when it comes to education.
Totally. And I think, if you look at what e-com's doing at the moment, there's under 100 calorie sections, there's under 200 calorie sections. In the last few years, we've seen dark chocolate sections appear. So I would actually say they're making strides forward, because we don't see, if you went into your local Sainsbury's or supermarket, whichever supermarket it may be, you haven't got 100 calorie bay for example. So clearly they are further ahead, but it doesn't need to just be about calories, because just because something's 100 calories, it's almost actually, can we go one step beyond to look at salt content, sugar content? But actually, Asda.com, I know, are really great. You can filter by protein content, fiber content, salt content. So yeah, there's some really exciting kind of strides forward being made in e-commerce.
Yeah. And more opportunity for smaller brands. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think it's easier to have almost, it's difficult in terms of online. There's so many brands and there's so many kind of different products and so many options, whereas obviously in store you're short of space. But I think, to your point, hopefully if, you know, the smaller brands maybe are slightly healthier, they can get to the top of the page a bit quicker. So yeah, definitely, I think there's a lot of areas that we can explore moving into 2022.
Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. And I think it's just nice to put a positive spin on what, you know, regulations can feel a bit sometimes. And HFSS is the most impossible phrase to say, so no one's, you know, chanting, talking about it. But yeah, I think there's lots of opportunity for brands, big and small, here to either sort of recreate what their product is, reformulation, or how they're positioning it, or smaller brands to just take up more space and get noticed. And I think it's all about making those decisions specifically for your brand right now.
Absolutely.
And on reformulation, we have a slightly different view in terms of consumers' responses to reformulation. Mallow Marsh, you're sticking to your guns on your taste. I don't blame you, it tastes delicious. But it's actually quite a positive news story. So we spoke about reformulation 2 years ago with Brits, and 55% said that they would agree that they wanted brands to make their products healthier, even if it changed the taste. So kind of around half are like, yeah, we would want that to happen and we're happy to sacrifice on taste. Actually, now it's 70% that are willing to accept that change in taste. Boom is slightly less resistant, but still 60% of them are saying they're willing to accept it. And actually, more compelling is 56% of people say they'd be more likely to buy products if it had been reformulated to make it healthier, and only 11% would be less likely to buy it. So it feels really quite like a push factor here, and an opportunity, as I said, to reposition who you are as a brand. And the stats are saying 70% of people are saying they're willing to take that slight change in taste for that healthier option. So we kind of got conflicting stories here, Becky, but it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on that information.
Yeah, being honest, when I read those stats, I was really surprised myself. And I think probably coming from a Confrec brand, I was like, oh my God, no, but no one would want their buttons or whatever it might be reformulated. But I think actually, when we talk about the categories that are maybe on the cusp, actually, people probably, you know, if you take mayo, a lot of people eat kind of, you know, reduced sugar mayo, and people aren't worried about it. So I think, and actually, we've all seen in the news over the last 4 or 5 years that own label brands within the supermarkets have done amazing jobs to kind of reduce their HFSS content. Yeah. So I think actually people are very mindful. I just think it depends what category you come from, because part of the reason that we have chosen not to reformulate was because we would be moving away from our heartland, which is confectionery and marshmallows, and creating a product that actually isn't Mallow Marsh, isn't our brand. So I think, to your point, it's actually being very careful around, it gives you an opportunity to pivot for positioning if that's what you want to do, but you don't have to. So I think for me, that's why Attest is really helpful, to do a bit more digging to understand, actually, does it depend on what category? Does it depend on your product? And actually, is there a similar equivalent out there that's already reduced sugar or reduced fat? And are the consumers liking that? Because I think it's quite a big jump to make without knowing what your consumers think, because I think we'd need to ask it very specific to what the product is. And I think, coming back to the kind of discussion that we've had throughout this, is price is the number one driver. And I think we need to be very careful that in reformulating products, they don't become more expensive, because yes, health is a concern, but price and taste are the top two most important. So they kind of, in terms of the research, conflict each other, because they're saying, yes, I'll accept reformulation, but I don't want to compromise on price or taste. So almost which way are consumers going? And I think that's where we need a bit more clarity to understand, are they saying it because they think they want to eat healthier, but the reality is actually they're going to continue to unhealthily snack every day? So for me, it's really interesting. And I think there's just more answers needed in terms of what the right steps forward are.
Yeah, I think it's such a valid point. And we've kind of focused on sweet treats here today for obvious reasons, but you can imagine that there's a huge variance when it comes to categories. Like, do people feel the same love as they do for their favorite chocolate choice versus, as you said, well, people do love mayo, but other kind of things like that, they're willing to make more of a sacrifice there. It's something maybe they eat more regularly. So just to have that health impact as well is going to be more important to them than their occasional snack that they have. So yeah, we can certainly dig into that data a little bit further. We are coming up to time. It's been amazing hearing your insight on this, Becky, especially, it's early doors. Lots of companies are really going through this right now. And so it's so valuable for you to share how Mallow Marsh are approaching this. I suppose just a closing question, what companies are inspiring you in the food and bev space? Or what would be advice for other food and bev brands that are trying to navigate the regulation at the moment?
Yeah, I think just advice from I'm a smaller brand, and I'm sure the larger brands have got huge teams working on it. But I think for us, it's gained real clarity. We're really trying to talk to our retailers early on to understand what the impact is. But then also, to your point, Sarah, let's try and think about this positively. So actually, what are the opportunities? How can we try and work with our retailers to create hotspots in aisle? Actually, for us at Mallow Marsh, we're saying, by more customers going in the aisle, we'll have more eyes on our pack. So actually we could potentially benefit from it. So it's almost twofold of actually gain real clarity early on and actually try not to get caught out, but also what are the opportunities, or how can you work with the retailers to solve some of their problems? Because ultimately we're all in it together. And then actually just in terms of inspiring, I think the work that Smarties have done on their recyclable packaging and moves in terms of sustainability have been incredible. I think people kind of forgot about Smarties, probably haven't eaten them in a while. And then as a result of their new packaging, I think they've gained a load of new customers, probably younger customers. And I think that's really inspiring to see, because I know recyclability is high on everyone's agenda, to be honest.
Yeah, 100%. We've got lots of customers coming to us to understand about, being a purposeful brand, sustainability, ecological impacts, and loads of data around it. And I think it does feel interlinked. It's an opportunity, as we said, to brands to shake things up. So bring in all of those factors to try and make it as beneficial for you as a brand, but also for your own consumers.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We have come to the time now. Just a gentle reminder again, if you did have any questions, please do submit them. We're more than happy to stick around after this and continue answering them. So we'd love to hear from you. Thank you again, everybody, for tuning in. Thank you, Becky, for joining me. It was great to chat with you today.
Thanks, guys.